There comes a time when keeping someone in your heart starts to feel like carrying a ghost, a weight that slows you down, haunts your peace, and keeps you tied to a version of yourself you've outgrown. You tell yourself you've moved on, but one song, one memory, one glance at his name, and suddenly he's right there again in your mind, in your chest, in the ache you thought you'd buried. That's not healing. That's holding on in disguise. To erase him from existence isn't about hate, revenge, or pretending he never mattered. It's about finally reclaiming your mind, your peace, your energy, all the things that were drained while you kept revisiting a past that had nothing left to give you. You can't build a new life while rereading an old chapter. You can't become your strongest self while carrying the memory of someone who couldn't see your worth. When you decide to erase him, it's not about proving anything to him. It's about choosing freedom for yourself. It's about no longer needing closure, no longer waiting for him to regret, no longer wondering if he misses you. It's about saying, I release you, not because you deserve peace, but because I do. And the truth is, when you finally stop fighting for a place in someone else's story, you begin to write your own clearer, stronger, and untouched by the ghosts of what used to be. That's not loss, that's liberation. That's how you erase him from existence, no regret, no return, no trace. The hardest part of moving on isn't deleting pictures or throwing away his things. It's stopping the thoughts that replay when you're alone. You think about what he said, what he did, how it ended, and somewhere in that loop, you keep him alive. Every time you revisit those moments, every time you check if he's viewed your story, every time you wonder if he misses you, you're still feeding his memory. You're giving him emotional power long after he's stopped earning it. Erasing him isn't a physical act, it's an emotional discipline. It's the moment you decide that he no longer deserves space in your mind or heart. You can't erase someone if you keep reopening the same wound. Healing doesn't happen while you're still scratching at it. The reason it feels like he still has control over you is because, on some level, you're still giving him your attention. That attention, your focus, your thoughts, your emotions is energy, and wherever your energy goes, that's what stays alive. So even though he's not there physically, he's still present in your thoughts, and that's what keeps you stuck. The real goodbye happens not when you stop talking to him, but when you stop mentally responding to him. The moment you stop feeding that energy, something powerful happens. You begin to feel lighter. You start to notice that peace isn't something that arrives suddenly. It's something that grows in the silence where your obsession used to live. Every time you choose not to look at his page, every time you stop yourself from overthinking what he might be doing, you take a piece of yourself back. You reclaim your mind piece by piece, moment by moment. That's how you erase him, not by force, but by detachment. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care more about your peace than his presence. It's realizing that obsessing over what he's doing now doesn't change the past, and it doesn't serve your future. You don't need to know if he regrets it. You don't need to prove you've moved on. You just need to start living as if he no longer defines your story, because he doesn't. When you take that energy that used to be focused on him and start pouring it into yourself, your goals, your healing, your growth, he begins to fade. His name stops echoing in your head. His memory stops interrupting your moments. That's how you know you're healing. Erasing someone isn't dramatic, it's quiet. It's the small decisions you make daily to not text, to not check, to not care. It's choosing silence over reaction, peace over chaos, self-worth over curiosity. The version of you that still keeps tabs on him is the version that still hopes for closure. But the version of you that erases him knows that closure doesn't come from him. It comes from you deciding that you're done giving your energy to what no longer exists. You'll know you're getting there when you stop feeling that rush to check his social media, when you stop wondering if he's thinking of you, when you stop explaining to people why it didn't work. The moment you stop giving emotional attention to what hurt you, you start healing. You stop trying to resurrect something that was never meant to survive. And over time, what once felt like a wound becomes nothing more than a lesson, something you learned from, not something you live in. When you finally stop feeding his memory, he stops existing in your world, not because you forgot him, but because you outgrew him. You evolved past the version of you that needed his validation. You stopped keeping him alive in your thoughts, and that's when you start breathing again. That's the moment you realize peace isn't found by holding on. It's found by letting go completely. You don't need revenge or closure or a final goodbye. You just need silence, because silence is where healing begins and where he finally disappears. When someone breaks you, the instinct is to chase closure. You want to understand why it ended the way it did. You want answers, an apology, maybe even a moment of honesty that makes all the pain make sense. But here's the truth: closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you. The person who hurt you cannot also be the one to heal you. You can't look for peace in the same place that created your chaos. The longer you wait for them to explain, the longer you stay stuck in the story that already ended. You might think that if he just said he was sorry, if he admitted he messed up, if he finally acknowledged your worth, it would make moving on easier. But would it really, or would it just reopen the wound? Even if he did apologize, it wouldn't undo what happened. It wouldn't take away the nights you cried or the times you questioned your value. What you're really craving isn't his apology, it's relief from the emotional weight of not understanding. And that relief doesn't come from him. It comes from you deciding that understanding isn't required for healing. When someone walks away, they take their reasons with them. You may never know the real story, and that has to be okay. Because when you stop chasing closure, you start creating peace. You stop needing him to validate your pain or justify your experience. You stop letting his silence hold you hostage. The truth is, closure is often just an illusion, a reason to stay connected a little longer, a reason to keep checking your phone, a reason to delay your healing. But healing isn't about having every answer. It's about accepting what is and trusting that peace can exist even in uncertainty. The need for closure is often just your heart's way of trying to make sense of rejection. You think, if I understand why, I can finally move on. But sometimes there's no why that makes sense. Sometimes people leave not because you did something wrong, but because they couldn't meet you where you were. Sometimes they were too afraid to be honest, too selfish to communicate, or too emotionally unavailable to give you what you needed. Waiting for closure from that kind of person is like waiting for a storm to apologize for the rain. It's never coming. You heal not when they give you closure, but when you give it to yourself, when you say, "This happened, it hurt, but it's not going to define me." You stop expecting the person who broke your heart to be the one who puts it back together. You stop trying to make sense of their chaos and start focusing on rebuilding your peace. That's where real strength comes from, not from fixing the past, but from moving forward in spite of it. There's a quiet kind of power in not needing their words anymore. When you reach that point, you stop reacting. You stop seeking their approval, their explanations, their validation. You stop making their absence the center of your story. And in that silence, you begin to rebuild your own sense of closure, one that comes from acceptance, not answers. Because sometimes closure isn't something you get, it's something you decide. One day, you'll look back and realize that not getting closure was the best thing that could have happened. It forced you to grow. It pushed you to find peace on your own. It made you stronger, more grounded, and more in control of your emotions. You'll see that the lack of closure was what freed you, because if he had given you the words you wanted, maybe you'd still be holding on. But by learning to let go without them, you became untouchable. You learned how to close the door yourself quietly, firmly, and without regret. That's the kind of closure that lasts forever. When you've been hurt, it's easy to believe that your story is now tied to him forever. You replay the moments, the laughter, the pain, as if they've become the defining chapters of your life. But the truth is, he was never meant to be the story. He was only a chapter, and no chapter, no matter how intense, deserves to define the entire book. When you decide to rewrite your narrative without him, you take back the authorship of your own life. You stop living as a supporting character in his story and step back into the role of the main character in yours. Rewriting your story doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means changing the meaning it holds. Instead of seeing him as the one who broke you, you start seeing him as the one who revealed what you won't tolerate anymore. Instead of defining yourself by how he left, you define yourself by how you rose after he did. Pain only keeps its power when you keep repeating the same story in your head, the one where you were hurt, betrayed, or abandoned. The moment you start rewriting it as a story of strength, not suffering, you change the entire narrative of your life. You were never meant to stay stuck in someone else's memory. You were meant to evolve, to grow beyond the version of yourself that tolerated less than you deserved. When you stop centering your story around him, you reclaim your future. You begin to create new memories, new passions, new experiences that don't revolve around loss, but around rediscovery. Because the moment you stop making him the reference point for your emotions, you start realizing how much of your life exists beyond him. There's a whole world waiting for you, one that doesn't carry his name in every sentence. Every time you catch yourself thinking, he used to make me feel this way, stop and replace it with, I can create that feeling myself. At every emotion you think he gave you, excitement, love, joy, came from within you. He was just the trigger, not the source. That means you can access those feelings again without him. You can create a life that gives you the same butterflies, the same laughter, the same warmth, but this time without the pain attached. That's what rewriting your narrative really means. It's realizing you were never dependent on him. You were dependent on the story you told yourself about him. When you start focusing on the present instead of the past, you begin to build something new. You start filling your days with things that bring you peace, people who make you feel seen, and goals that light you up. Slowly, he fades from your story, not because you forced yourself to forget, but because he simply no longer fits. The version of you who loved him doesn't exist anymore. You've evolved, you've healed. You've rewritten yourself into someone he wouldn't even recognize, someone too grounded, too fulfilled, too confident to ever go back. There's something deeply empowering about looking at your past and saying, that was just a chapter. It doesn't erase what happened. It just puts it in its rightful place. It becomes a lesson, not a legacy. You realize that what once broke you actually built you. It shaped your standards, your boundaries, your awareness. You start to see that every heartbreak, every tear, every disappointment was leading you here, to a version of yourself that no longer settles, no longer chases, no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy. And when you finally rewrite your story, you stop needing to erase him because he no longer holds power over your narrative. He's not the heartbreak anymore. He's just a sentence in a book full of triumph, growth, and self-love. You close that chapter not with bitterness, but with gratitude, because without it, you wouldn't have learned how powerful you really are. Your story isn't about him anymore. It's about you, and that's the story worth telling. There was a time when he had the power to ruin your day without even trying. One message could lift you up, and one silence could tear you apart. That's what emotional attachment does. It gives someone else control over your peace. When you start to replace reacting with reclaiming, you take that power back. You stop letting your emotions be dictated by his actions or his absence. You stop being controlled by the highs and lows of someone who was never consistent to begin with. Instead of asking, "Why did he do this?" you start asking, "Why am I still letting it affect me?" That question alone shifts everything. Erasing him isn't about punishing him. It's about freeing yourself from emotional dependency. The truth is, he knew exactly how to trigger you. He knew what to say, what to ignore, what kind of attention to give to keep you hanging on just enough. And for a long time, you played along, not because you were weak, but because you cared. But when you decide to reclaim your energy, you stop playing that game altogether. You stop reacting to every message, every story, every attempt to get a rise out of you. Instead, you respond with silence, with calm, with self-respect. That's when you become untouchable. Reclaiming your power doesn't mean you never feel pain again. It means you no longer let pain decide how you respond. You start training your emotions the same way you train a muscle. Every time you feel the urge to reach out, you breathe. Every time you want to react, you pause. Every time you think about proving your worth, you remind yourself you don't have to. You don't erase him by engaging in emotional battles. You erase him by no longer showing up for them. You teach your heart that peace is more valuable than validation. When you react, you keep him relevant. When you reclaim, you make him irrelevant. You show yourself that he doesn't control your emotions anymore. Because when you're still reacting to someone, they still have a hold on you, even if you hate them, even if you've blocked them, even if you've told everyone you've moved on. Detachment isn't proven by distance. It's proven by emotional neutrality. It's when his name stops making your stomach drop. It's when you can see something that once triggered you and feel nothing. That's the moment you know you've taken your power back. The reason silence is so powerful is because it can't be manipulated. Words can be twisted, emotions can be exploited, but silence says everything. It says, "I've outgrown this." It says, "You don't get access to my energy anymore." It says, "I'm not playing this game." When you stop feeding drama with reaction, it dies on its own. And while he might think your silence means you don't care, what it really means is that you finally do about yourself. Over time, you'll realize that emotional control is freedom. The peace you used to search for in his validation now lives inside you. You no longer chase answers or attention. You choose peace again and again until it becomes natural. The version of you that once overreacted, over-explained, overgave, she's gone. The woman who stands in her place now doesn't need to prove her worth. She knows that her energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. So, the next time the urge to react shows up, to send that message, to defend yourself, to demand clarity, pause. Breathe. Remember that your reaction is a form of currency, and not everyone deserves to be paid with your attention. When you choose to reclaim instead of react, you quietly erase him, not from your phone, not from your memory, but from your emotional world. And that's where real freedom begins, because peace isn't about having nothing to react to. It's about being so grounded that nothing outside of you can shake your center again. When you decide to build a life so full that there's no space left for his ghost, something magical happens. He stops being the center of your world without you even trying. Because healing isn't about sitting in your sadness waiting to feel better. It's about moving forward so completely that your energy has no time to feed what broke you. You can't erase him by thinking about him less. You erase him by living so fully that he naturally fades into irrelevance. The more joy, purpose, and growth you pour into your life, the less room there is for his shadow to linger. When you were with him, your world probably revolved around him. His moods affected yours. His attention determined your confidence. His absence left you restless. You built your emotional rhythm around someone inconsistent, and that's why you always felt off balance. But now you get to rebuild from the ground up, this time around you. You get to decide what fills your days, who gets your energy, and what kind of love you allow in your space. Because the truth is, when your life is full of things that feed your soul, his memory simply doesn't fit anymore. There's no space for someone who brought chaos in a life that's now built on peace. Building a full life doesn't mean rushing to fill every hour with distractions. It means building a foundation that nourishes your mind, your body, and your spirit. It's waking up with purpose, whether that purpose is pursuing your career, your art, your fitness, or your friendships. It's reconnecting with the things you used to love before you met him, the hobbies, the dreams, the laughter that got buried under the weight of that relationship. The more you pour into yourself, the more you start to remember who you were before he took up all that space in your heart. One of the biggest mistakes people make after heartbreak is waiting to feel okay before they start living again. But life doesn't wait. You have to move even when it hurts. You have to go out, explore, create, laugh, learn, even when part of you still aches. Because healing doesn't come from time alone. It comes from filling that time with meaning. Every new memory you create replaces an old one. Every new experience reminds you that life didn't end with him, it began after him. And here's the beautiful part: when you fill your life with purpose, you stop craving his presence. You stop checking for his name because your days are already full. You stop wondering if he misses you because you no longer need to be missed. You start realizing that the best revenge isn't to make him regret losing you, it's to live in such a way that he no longer even crosses your mind. His ghost fades naturally when your life becomes brighter, fuller, richer than it ever was with him in it. Think about it: when your life is small, his absence feels huge, but when your life expands, his memory becomes tiny. When you travel, learn, grow, love again, and show up fully in your own life, you realize he was never the source of your happiness, you were. He was just a mirror reflecting what you were capable of feeling, but now you've learned to be the source of that feeling yourself. That's freedom. Eventually, you'll wake up one day and realize you didn't think about him at all, not once. And it won't be because you forced yourself to forget. It'll be because your life is finally too full of love, purpose, and peace to make space for his ghost. That's what it means to truly erase someone, not by pretending they never existed, but by living a life so abundant that their memory simply runs out of room. You've replaced the emptiness with growth, the longing with gratitude, the pain with peace, and in that fullness, you've found something far better than closure. You've found yourself again. When you finally decide to forgive yourself, not for what he did, but for what you allowed, you reclaim your power in a way that no apology from him ever could. Because forgiveness here isn't about excusing his behavior, it's about freeing yourself from the emotional grip it's had on your life. You see, when we hold on to resentment, replaying the moments we were betrayed or devalued, we unknowingly keep ourselves tied to the very person we're trying to forget. Every "why did I let that happen" keeps us stuck in the past, and every "I should have known better" anchors us in guilt. But the moment you say, "I forgive myself for not knowing then what I know now," everything begins to shift. That's the moment you truly start to erase him, because you're no longer fighting the past, you're freeing yourself from it. You can't change that you cared for someone who didn't value you, but you can change what that story means to you now. You can stop seeing yourself as the woman who was taken for granted and start seeing yourself as the woman who learned, evolved, and came back stronger. Regret serves no purpose once it's taught you what it needed to teach. It's like carrying around a heavy book you've already read. At some point, you have to put it down and move on. That's what forgiving yourself does. It lightens the load. It lets you walk freely into your next chapter without dragging the old one behind you. So many people think healing means waiting for time to dull the pain, But real healing happens when you stop punishing yourself for how long you stayed, how much you gave, or how deeply you loved. You loved because you have a beautiful heart. That's not a weakness, that's a gift. The wrong person might have mishandled it, but that doesn't mean you should close it off forever. The moment you release the shame around your past choices, you start to see that every step, even the painful ones, was part of you growing into the person you were meant to become. You stop saying, "I wish I never met him," and start saying, "I'm grateful I now know what I'll never accept again." Forgiving yourself also means letting go of the need for closure from him. You don't need his acknowledgement or his apology to move forward. Closure isn't something you get from another person. It's something you create within yourself when you decide that the story ends here. You rewrite the ending by saying, "He doesn't define me. That chapter was just one part of my story, not the whole book." You stop waiting for the day he realizes what he lost, because your healing no longer depends on his recognition. Your peace becomes the only validation you need, and forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. Some days you'll feel powerful and free. Other days you'll still feel the sting of old memories. That's okay. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean you'll never feel the pain again. It just means you won't let it control you anymore. Each time you feel that ache and choose peace instead of blame, you take back another piece of your power. You slowly build a version of yourself that's wiser, softer, and more self-assured than ever before. When you finally forgive yourself, something beautiful happens. You stop identifying with the version of you who got hurt and start identifying with the version of you who survived. You stop seeing your past as a scar and start seeing it as a signature proof that you went through something that could have broken you but didn't. And that's when the real erasing happens, not because he disappears, but because you no longer carry the emotional residue of what he represented. You've let go not just of him, but of the weight you carried because of him. That's not forgetting. That's freedom, and freedom in its truest form is when you can look back at your past, smile gently, and keep walking without any trace of regret. At the end of all of this, it's not really about erasing him, it's about remembering you, the woman who existed long before he came into your life. The one who laughed louder, dreamed bigger, and loved without fear. The one who might have forgotten her worth for a moment, but never truly lost it. Because when you decide to delete him from your world, you're not doing it out of hate or revenge, you're doing it out of self-respect. You're saying, "I deserve peace. I deserve energy that reciprocates mine. I deserve a life that doesn't revolve around pain." Erasing him isn't about pretending he never existed. It's about making sure his presence no longer defines your existence. It's the quiet decision to stop reopening old wounds, stop explaining what he should have already understood, and stop waiting for a version of him that never arrives. You're not leaving to prove a point. You're leaving because the story has already taught you everything it was meant to. And when you finally walk away without regret, you discover that freedom isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or dramatic goodbyes. It's subtle, like peace in your chest where there used to be chaos, like laughter that doesn't carry pain behind it, like sleeping soundly without checking your phone for closure that never came. That's the kind of healing that doesn't need validation. It's private, powerful, and permanent. So as you move forward, don't look back to see if he's watching. Don't hope he regrets losing you, because if you've truly deleted him from your world, his regret no longer matters. What matters is the life you're building now, one that's rich, full, and completely yours. A life where your happiness isn't tied to someone's inconsistency. A life where your peace is your priority, not your sacrifice. In the end, cutting someone off completely isn't an act of coldness. It's an act of self-love. It's the moment you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. You stop needing closure and start living it. And that's when the story truly ends, not with a dramatic goodbye, but with quiet strength and the kind of confidence that says, I'm done looking back. I'm walking forward without regret.